Alright, if you really intended to know which phone wins the battery test, now just before you skip all the way to the end, here we have a video summary down in the comment section below, which I will be pinning it to the top. But there will be so much more than just the numbers in this video, I promise, so stay with us. Hey everyone, Ray here. This time we're back with 8 flagship phones and we'll be putting them to the test for their battery life. So it's an ultimate battery drain test from 100% to 0%, which you guys have been waiting for. Now, to make sure the test will be as fair as possible, we've set the screen brightness of all the 8 phones here to 250 nits, well within a margin of error of 5 nits. It's really challenging for my human finger to set the screen brightness to 250, exactly that figure across all the sliders here. With that said, the battery life test today will be done by a human, me, myself, and not by an app. And as usual, this is not a voiceover done by AI, no AI is involved in this video. Now, we have designed 8 different tasks for these devices here today. From the lightest task, which you could be doing most of the time, like YouTube video playback and photo editing using the native gallery app. Also, you could be recording a meeting and getting a transcript of it. In this case, that would be a 1 hour long transcript in this video. Now, when it comes to stuff with moderate battery drain, that would be mostly social media apps like Instagram. I'll be using my 10 fingers to scroll along the main feeds on these 8 phones for an hour. We'll be testing their battery drain for video recording as well, and that's in 4K video recording. And last but not least, we'll also be putting them to the test for some serious gaming test. 1. To compare their battery drain under heavy loading. 2. To get a clearer picture of how they actually perform in the real world. And 3. To reveal their performance in heat dissipation and heat control. Alright, in this comparison, we have the iPhone 17 Pro Max, Nothing Phone 3. It is a last year model, though it's packing a 5000 mAh battery, same as the S25 Ultra and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7. Phones of this kind is really going extinct. It comes with a 3.5mm headphone jack and a SIM card slot with microSD card support. Well, speaking of unique feature here on the S25 Ultra and the iPhone 17 Pro Max, these are the only 2 models here that comes with an anti-reflective coating. Samsung's really done a remarkable job when it comes to the anti-glare coating. Despite the S25 Ultra hair's aged more than a year, the coating's still there, safe and sound on my unit here, and it has been my daily driver all this time. It also packs one of the largest displays here that's measured at 6.9 inches. Now, the iPhone and the Poco caught up in this game this year. If you're searching for a large size phablet, these 3 could be on your list. On the contrary, here on the Honor Magic 8 Pro, that's the only phone here that comes with a quad curved display. The screen size here is also a little bit smaller at 6.71 inches. However, battery capacity here is definitely going wild. Honor's giving it a 7100 mAh battery on the global version, and that would be a 6270 mAh cell if you're living in Europe. While here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, that's an even larger battery, rated at 7500 mAh for the global version. And we'll also be getting a silicon carbon battery here on the Poco, as well as the Vivo X300 Pro, and they're both rated at 6500 mAh. Without further ado, first and foremost, for the screen brightness, we'll be setting it to 250 nits across all the devices here, using an SDR YouTube video. And at the same time, the stopwatch is now running, so that the battery used for the calibration of the screen brightness will also be accounted for the final battery life, and right now every single one of them still got 100% of the battery. Now, the first task we've prepared for them is a relatively light one. In the coming hour, I'll be editing the same set of photos using the native gallery app and all the AI tools inside it. Now, it's interesting to point out that the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7 is only using Google Photos as its native gallery app, while here on the Nothing Phone 3, they're relying on Google Photos for any sort of AI photo editing as well. Don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing at all. Like for this round of the test, now let's try to remove the headphone that's covering part of my head and my ears. The iPhone and surprisingly the Oppo failed to generate what's missing there. That could be due to ethical issue when it comes to generating human faces. Now, Poco and Vivo both managed to generate my ears that were covered by the headphone. You might however be able to tell that's not exactly my ear. The skin tone and the texture here is slightly off. While here on the Honor, it's like I had longer hair. But the most convincing results are actually coming from Sony's and Nothing's Google Photos, or Google's photo. So if we really have to nitpick it, Samsung's Galaxy AI, especially for this kind of shots, is still the king when it comes to AI photo editing. Now let's try to remove, in this situation it will be me, though it can also be a common situation that you encounter a passerby or someone overlapping with the main subject that you're trying to frame in the center of the frame. Right, Google Photos on both the Sony and the Nothing actually delivered really high quality and promising results, while Samsung's Galaxy AI is still one of the best here. And for this particular photo, actually, the Poco and the Vivo did pretty well as well. Now for this test, let's try if they're able to generate the missing pixels on the building behind me. The challenging bit here is that the building is not completely new, so that there could be more complex lines and textures along the way. Right, all 8 phones here, including the iPhone with its cleanup feature, successfully removed me and all the passerbys in the frame and generated the missing pixels there. So if we zoom in just a little bit to check the quality of the image, despite Samsung's Ultra phones now more than a year old, their object eraser tool here is absolutely still leading in this competition. In the meantime, all the Poco, Vivo, Honor, Oppo, Nothing and Sony delivered a usable photo here. Now this time around we'll be removing the ice cream cone that's covering part of my hand and see which of them will be able to generate the missing pixels of my hand with reasonable and realistic texture. Right, this time the Oppo Find X9 Pro actually delivered a pleasant surprise, while here on the Samsung S25 Ultra, these are actually the only 2 phones that were able to generate a complete hand with a right shape. Now what about if we try to remove the hand once and for all and make the ice cream look like it's floating in midair? This time, Google Photos on the Nothing and the Sony, it as well generated promising and convincing results, nearly on a par with Samsung's AI. Now, to be fair, Google Photos actually available on not only all the Android phones here today, but also the iPhones. So if we're talking about AI photo editing, here on the Poco, Vivo, Honor and Oppo, they all went the extra mile on providing something more than just an AI removal tool. Like here on the Honor, Vivo and Poco, they've got AI expansion, while here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, they've got a unique feature to light up a backlight or low-light portrait. Now, I know it's only been a couple of sets of comparison photos, so it took me literally an hour to edit just a few photos across 8 phones. Now, filming it actually took up most of the time. Now, as we've set the screen timeout to 10 minutes on all these devices here, so that would be still a fair comparison. However, it is indeed 1 hour of super light usage. Here on the iPhone, we've got 99% of the battery left here, so the first few percent of the battery usually tend to drop a little bit slower than the rest of the scale. However, we will be draining them all the way to 0%, so that won't matter that much. Now we have 95% left here on the Nothing Phone 3, 98% here on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7, and 95% as well here on the S25 Ultra. Now it's becoming interesting here. It could be the first few percent, but also the large battery capacity here on the Vivo, Honor and Oppo. All 3 of them showing 100% of the battery after 1 hour of usage. And finally we have 99% here on the Poco F8 Ultra. Right, so that was the first few percent, so we won't be comparing battery usage for this task. Now it's about 21 hours and 12 minutes, and the timer is now 1 hour and 12 minutes and running. Now let's start the second round of today's test. We will be running into the benchmark 4 times in a row. That should be taking up roughly around an hour, maybe slightly more than that. Now this should give us a clear picture of how they manage power consumption under heavy loading. And we're not stopping here, we will also be monitoring their heat dissipation and heat control over the hour as well. Now it's been more than half an hour since we've been running the stress test, and what we will be doing here is looking at the thermal imaging of each of the phones here. Here on the back of the iPhone 17 Pro Max we are reading 42.6 degrees Celsius, 42.8 the highest point here. Just for the comparison, the surface temperature of my hand was 36.3 degrees Celsius, and based on my experience, everything under 40 degrees will feel like there's no heat generated from the device at all. And for a temperature of about 44 degrees Celsius, that would be slightly warm. And for everything over 50 degrees Celsius, that would be hot to touch. Right here on the back of the Nothing Phone 3 is reaching 48 degrees Celsius. Right here on the Sony, it seems that they've finally solved the overheating issue here on the 1 Mark 7. The hottest point, or shall I say the warmest point, is measured at only around 43 degrees Celsius. Right, it's Samsung's turn. It seems that they're doing it even better than what Sony and Apple's able to do. The surface temperature of the phone is only at around 41.3 degrees Celsius. Now, the warmest area here on the Vivo X300 Pro is actually located below the massive camera array. That makes sense, and that should be where the chipset's located at. So your hand might be touching it more frequently, though the temperature is not that high at all, so it won't be a huge issue. And here, Honor's taken a similar design route here on the Magic 8 Pro. The hottest point point. Again, that's below the camera array, and the warmest point here is actually under 43 degrees Celsius. Right here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, that's actually reaching more than 50 degrees, and that's on the top right hand corner of the back of the phone. Now your hand and fingers should be touching this area of the phone the least, so that makes sense as well. And finally, we have the Poco F8 Ultra. The temperature here on the back of the phone right under the camera plateau area, that's over 50 degrees Celsius as well. So the phone runs hotter here, and that's a bad thing, isn't it? Well, I would say it seems like Poco's prioritizing squeezing the extra horsepower out of the same chipset over keeping the phone a little bit cooler, though scaling back performance output. As based on our tests, the Poco's actually winning almost all benchmark tests. That includes Geekbench 6 for multi-core CPU performance. Now the Antutu benchmark will give us a fuller picture. The Poco F8 Ultra's indeed scoring slightly higher than the Honor Magic 8 Pro, which features the same Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, and the Poco also performed the best in our custom stress test. Now you see, it's not only performing the best at the first run, but it's also the only phone here that's able to sustain that level of peak performance right through to the final round of a test. So we may conclude Poco is indeed the gaming lineup from Xiaomi, and it seems that they are allowing the phone to run a little bit warmer to get smoother frame rate and, most importantly, more stable frame rate. Now for average gamer, especially if you're looking for a phone that doesn't get as hot and has better battery life. Alright, so that's 1 hour and 15 minutes of Antutu benchmark. With a little bit of math, here's a graph showing battery in percentage used per hour. Now we'll definitely be draining the battery in a matter of a couple of hours if we're running benchmark all the way through to the end. So in the coming hour, 2 hours to be exact, we will be playing YouTube videos with the same 250 nits screen brightness. Right, we're stepping into the 4 hours and 30 minutes screen on time territory. And as for YouTube, that's a 2-hour-long video playback session, 114 minutes to be exact. Again, we'll be calculating that back to battery in percentage used per hour. They're performing really closely in terms of YouTube videos playback. Now, if you're only watching YouTube videos on your phone, the Oppo Find X9 Pro and the Vivo X300 Pro, these two will actually last more than 24 hours, 27 hours to be exact. Now, going back to the remaining battery levels here on the 8 phones, we have 65% here on the iPhone, 55% on the Nothing Phone 3, 66% on the Sony. Again, impressive battery management. Now the Samsung S25 Ultra, that's 62%. The Vivo X300 Pro with a 6500 mAh battery, 67% of the battery is remaining here. And for now, the Honor Magic 8 Pro still leading the race with 73% left. 68% here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro and 59% on the Poco F8 Ultra. Alright, so what we're doing here is a 1 hour long 4K video recording test to get higher video quality. Well, not exactly right now, but when we're taking them outside, we've turned on Dolby Vision or HDR recording on all of them here. Now for a fair and controlled test, we're putting them all on the same surface here, so they should be dealing with the same room temperature and the absence of image stabilization in this case, also the same amount of information to capture. Now it's been around 30 minutes since we've started the recording. In terms of heat control and heat dissipation, the first one we're going to take a look here is the Sony 1 Mark 7. Now they have been suffering from overheating issues for video recording for years, and great news for them, it seems like overheating is no longer an issue here. The hottest spot here on the back of the phone, that's well under control at 42.2 degrees Celsius. On the contrary, here on the Vivo and the Honor, they are running a little bit hotter when recording videos. So for everything under 50 degrees, I would say that's well under control. And take a look here, the hottest spot on the Vivo X300 Pro is actually located right inside the camera array. This could be where Vivo's dedicated camera chip located at, as they are using an extra chip to enhance imaging algorithm. Right, in terms of battery consumption, here on the Honor, 54% of the battery is left. Now the Oppo's overtaken the Honor, having 56% of its battery left. It seems like it's using less power for video recording, while here on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7, still over 50% here, 52% here, and that's actually very close to what we have on the Honor and Oppo. Now we have 48% here on the iPhone, 45% left on the Vivo X300 Pro, 43% here on the Samsung, 42% on the Poco F8 Ultra, and finally 38% here on the Nothing Phone 3. Now to be exact, we have been recording 4K videos for 56 minutes. Again, with a little bit of math, here's a graph showing battery in percentage used per hour for video recording. Right, video quality and image quality itself is definitely what matters most. For that, we have a couple of videos, a playlist of videos covering video quality and still image quality as well. Now, you're always welcome to subscribe to our channel and watch every comparison video we have to offer. Now it's 5 hours and 45 minutes of battery drain test. I'll be taking some rest, leaving them here overnight and not touching them at all. And to be fair, personally I don't have 8 SIM cards with me, so all of them here is connected to Wi-Fi only, and we'll be able to see how much power they used overnight. Okay, so that was 12.5 hours of standby time, so we've left them here longer than what we could be doing normally. And apparently the Vivo X300 Pro and Oppo Find X9 Pro are using the lowest amount of power overnight. Again, Sony is doing a really great job here in optimizing battery usage overnight. And right now, 41% of the battery is still left on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, 30% here on the Nothing, 47% here on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7. That's quite a lot of battery to drain in the second day of the test. And we have 36% here on the S25 Ultra, 38% here on the Vivo X300 Pro, 45% here on the Honor, and 52% here on the Oppo, and it's leading the race at the moment. Finally, we have 27% here on the Poco. And now we'll be looking at some Instagram short videos. Just to keep things fair here again, we'll be searching a keyword here, scrolling along the main feeds for the coming hour. This way, they should be showing similar videos and contents across the hour, just to keep the variables as little as possible. Alright, we're down to 36% here on the iPhone, 5% of its battery was used over the hour, and we're down to sub-20 levels here on the Nothing Phone 3 and Poco F8 Ultra, 18% of the battery left here on the Nothing, and 17% here on the Poco. Now the Samsung and the Vivo are actually performing really similarly, so we have 30% here on the Samsung and 32% here on the Vivo X300 Pro, and both the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7 and the Honor Major 8 Pro still got 39% of their battery left. And finally, we have got 9% more battery left here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro, that's 48 in total. Now we're slowly moving towards the 7th hour of the battery drain test, and the next task we'll be throwing at them will be audio recording. Now here we have an extra phone playing another YouTube video of mine, and the native voice recorder app is used on all the 8 phones here. And right here we have an instant transcript of what I was saying in the video. Same here on the Vivo X300 Pro, the Honor, Poco and Oppo. Now here on the Samsung, we'll be able to transcribe that audio recording later on, while on the Nothing and Sony, we don't have such AI feature baked inside their voice recorder app. Now when it comes to summarizing that transcript, especially here, what we've got here, that's a 1 hour long voice recording. Transcribing it and summarizing that could be really important here. And when it comes to organizing and formatting the information, we have a feature here on the Honor Major 8 Pro that's named as AI Minutes. That's basically organizing and formatting the content of your summary. Meanwhile, Galaxy AI here is definitely doing their job summarizing the voice recording. Same here on the Oppo Find X9 Pro. However, here on the iPhone, Vivo and Poco, you can always extract and copy the text, paste it on their native Note app and work with your AI summary there. While here on the Nothing Phone 3 and Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7, you might want a third-party app for this. Though most of the time, Google Gemini will get you covered. With that said, back to our battery test here. So that was a 1 hour long voice recording battery drain test, and this time around, battery in percentage used for this task was actually pretty much the same across all these 8 phones. And up to this point, the Oppo Find X9 Pro is leading the race by a slight margin, with 39% of its battery left. And here, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7, shockingly, that's actually the second place here with 34% of its battery here. And just before the battery dies here on the Poco F8 Ultra and the Nothing Phone 3, the last round of the test we will be pushing them to the limit in terms of performance output. So what we've got here is 3 levels of graphics test, 3D Mark Wildlife Unlimited being the lightest one, while Solar Bay Unlimited being the more advanced one with ray tracing support, and ultimately we have still Nomad Lite, that's a desktop class game test. Again, we'll be looking at both performance output and heat dissipation. In terms of heat control, we may conclude here the iPhone's doing great this year thanks to the aluminium body and the vapor chamber inside. Now, apparently Sony is doing great this year as well on their One Mark 7, so overheating is basically non-existent on their latest generation of flagships. Well, speaking of getting a little bit warm, the Poco F8 Ultra is the only phone here getting over 50 degrees Celsius, and I can definitely feel the heat from the back of the phone and the metal frame. Now, similar to our previous conclusion, the Poco F8 Ultra is actually unleashing the most amount of horsepower out of a Snapdragon 80 Elite Gen 5. However, when it comes to games with ray tracing support, it seems that the Vivo X300 Pro and the Oppo, with the Dimensity 9500 processor inside, overtook phones with Snapdragon 80 Elite Gen 5. Now, in FPS, for lighter games, well, possibly most of the games outside, in this case Wildlife Unlimited, phones with the Snapdragon 80 Elite and 80 Elite Gen 5 as well as the Dimensity counterpart are all able to deliver 120 FPS stable gaming performance for casual games. Now, heavy-duty games with ray tracing, anything beyond 30 FPS would be what I called playable, and over 45 would be perceived to be smooth, though none of them scored over 60 FPS here. And for games that are truly desktop class with TAA anti-aliasing, this could truly be the next direction of mobile gaming, as at the moment no one here, including the phones with Snapdragon 80 Elite Gen 5, is able to deliver more than 30 frames per second. And now let's go back to the battery life test. Here we've crossed the 8-hour and 30 minutes mark. Alright, the first casualty we have today is the Nothing Phone 3. You know, that kind of makes sense as we're comparing it to phones with either a huge battery or phones like the iPhone, Sony and Galaxy. They certainly have very good battery optimization. And now, just 1 minute and 40 seconds later, the Poco F8 Ultra, there is sort of a battery low notification. And eventually, 8 hours and 32 minutes, we lost the Poco F8 Ultra. The phone runs a little bit hotter and the battery drains a little bit faster if we throw heavy-duty stuff to it. It's more like, would you prefer higher benchmark scores and smoother frame rates for longer gaming session? But that would be draining the battery quicker than the competition, especially if we compare it to phones with similar or the same battery capacity. And now that's totally out of my expectation. We have 1% left here on the S25 Ultra, and here on the Vivo X300 Pro 2% here. The battery cell inside the Vivo does have 1500 mAh more power compared to the one inside the Samsung. And should I be happy about it? The one with a smaller battery, the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, is going home first after 9 hours and 14 minutes of use. I'm sort of satisfied with this result, though Apple seems to be doing slightly better than Samsung in terms of battery optimization, though a slightly larger battery could be rewriting the results which the S26 Ultra is rumored to be having. And now, almost crossing the 9.5 hours mark, 9 hours and 23 minutes, the Vivo X300 Pro is leaving the show. Now, if you take a look at this graph again and focus on the Vivo X300 Pro, it's actually performing exceptionally well most of the time, from AI photo editing, YouTube videos playback, short videos watching on Instagram, and voice recording, as well as overnight battery drain. Now, the only task that is draining more battery than the competition is video recording. That's a total of 10% more battery used compared to the Oppo Find X9 Pro. In my opinion, however, video quality and image quality is what matters most when it comes to the camera, and in terms of skin tone, low light performance, long range zoom, as well as video capabilities, we have those covered in our previous reviews. So right now, just minutes after we flipped over the Vivo X300 Pro, here at 9 hours and 32 minutes, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 7 called it a day, leaving the top 3 for today. And surprisingly, the iPhone 17 Pro Max still going all the way up to this point. We will see if Samsung and Sony will be able to fight back with their 2026 flagships. With no warning or notification of any sort, at 9 hours and 42 minutes, the iPhone's leaving home, leaving the battle between the Honor and the Oppo. Now, both of these phones here has got a battery that's rated for more than 7000 mAh. You have a 7100 mAh battery here on the global version, and if you're living in Europe, you will be having a 6270 mAh battery inside the Magic 8 Pro. Now, who's going to be the winner today? We're getting the low battery warning here on the Honor Magic 8 Pro first, just just shy of 10 hours of use. So in terms of battery life, the winner is, indeed, the Oppo Find X9 Pro with the largest battery in this competition. And I think the fact that it used much less power for video recording compared to the Honor and the Oppo directly pushed it to the top of the list. And eventually, at 10 hours and 23 minutes, the Oppo Find X9 Pro is finally showing signs of getting tired. It jumped right into the super power saving mode when 1% of the battery is left. I did try to bypass it and open apps like usual, but apparently only the basic functions can be used up to this point, so we'll call it a day. So just to have a quick recap here, the test we just did, we had light stuff like YouTube video playback, casual photo editing using the AI tools built into the Gallery app, voice recording and getting a 1 hour long transcript using their native AI, to Instagram short videos watching and video recording, which will be using more power, all the way to the most heavy-duty stuff including gaming test and stress test. Now, battery life could be just part of a story when we're deciding which phone's better than which, and we're very much excited for the upcoming S26 Ultra and the Xiaomi 17 Ultra. And don't forget Sony's flagship in 2026, but that will most likely going on sale in the second half of the year, so hopefully we will be having a new edition of this test really soon.